What if I told you that a man can drive at 120 miles per hour and still be running from something much deeper than the police? What if the loudest sound in a night full of sirens wasn't the helicopters, but a little girl asking, "Daddy, are you coming home?" Tonight's story isn't just about a chase through an American suburb under flashing blue lights. It's about pride, about loyalty, about the illusion of strength. It's about how the street code can feel like family until it becomes a cage. And it's about a father who believed he was unbreakable until one phone call made him breathless in a way no bullet ever could. You're going to see how one decision leads to another. How just one run turns into a dead end. How a mission meant to prove power becomes a moment that exposes fear. You'll feel the pressure of the perimeter closing in. You'll stand under the helicopter light with him. You'll hear the voice that changes everything. And when that final second arrives, you might ask yourself what strength really means. Because sometimes, the most dangerous prison isn't jail. It's ego. It's the need to prove something. It's the belief that being ride or die is the same as being a man. And tonight, you'll watch that belief fall apart in real time. Not in slow motion. Not in fantasy. But in the cold reality of consequence. So stay with me. Listen carefully. Because this isn't just a crime story. It's a mirror. And before this night ends, you may find yourself asking, if you were offered one last chance, would you recognize it in time? If this kind of storytelling hits you differently, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, because around here, we don't just tell stories, we unpack them. He was cutting through the suburban grid in a black VW Golf, windows down just enough to let the winter air slap his face awake. Streetlights flickered over cracked asphalt, corner stores with metal grates, and rows of tired duplexes that looked like they'd been holding their breath for years. The bass in the speakers thumped like a second heartbeat, but his real rhythm was the one in his chest, fast, ugly, breathless. He told himself it was just another run, another in and out, another night where the street code paid the bills. But even before he saw them, he felt them, like a storm rolling in behind him, sirens somewhere distant, then closer, then right on top of his neck. And when the first flash of blue lights hit his rear view, his palms went slick with cold sweat, like his body knew the truth before his mind admitted it. He muttered, "Nah, not tonight," like the universe was negotiable, then his foot dropped heavy on the gas anyway. The Golf lurched forward, turbo whining, tires grabbing for traction as he shot past a parked minivan and a bus stop with a lonely ad for cheap lawyers. He didn't even check the speed. He felt it, the way the steering got light, the way the road started to blur into one long decision you can't take back. Behind him, the squad car sirens weren't just noise. They were pressure, like hands pushing him toward a corner he didn't want to reach. He'd been taught not to panic, not to hesitate, not to think too much, because thinking too much was how you started feeling human again. And feeling human, in his world, was dangerous. Human people froze, human people cried, human people begged. So he went into that other mode, the one the neighborhood called locked in, the ride-or-die version of him that didn't shake. Still, his throat tightened, because he knew what was in the back, and if the cops found it, it was a dead end, no appeals, no second acts. In the trunk, under a blanket that smelled like old smoke and cheap cologne, were the kind of things you don't casually explain to a judge. Not one bad choice stuff, more like, this is who you are now stuff, the kind that turns a name into a headline. He kept telling himself it wasn't his, it was always the crew, always the plan, always, I'm just the driver, like the universe cared about job titles. But the truth. He'd agreed to it, because groceries cost money, rent didn't wait, and pride is an expensive addiction in the suburbs. People outside that life think criminals are fearless, but fear is the fuel. Fear of being broke again, fear of looking weak, fear of being nobody. And he'd been nobody before. The kid teachers expected to fail, the kid store owners followed down aisles, the kid police stared at a little too long. So now, with blue lights painting his mirrors, he wasn't just running from cops. He was running from ever being that kid again. He cut left onto a wider road lined with fast food signs and pawn shops, the kind of strip where dreams go to get resold. A helicopter's distant thrum started to creep into the sky, low and patient, like it had time and he didn't. He tried to breathe slow, like he'd seen in movies. Inhale, exhale, steady hands, but the air came jagged, breathless and hot. Think, he told himself, then hated himself for it, because thinking was where the guilt lived, and guilt didn't help you outrun a radio. He glanced at his phone, screen cracked, thumb hovering. Calling the boss wasn't comfort, it was procedure, like punching in at a job you can't quit. Every second felt like a coin flip. A red light could become a courtroom, a speed bump could become a coffin. Still, he whispered, one last chance, and dialed, because in his world you didn't disappear, you checked in. The call connected fast, no greeting, just that voice, calm and cold, like the man on the other end wasn't hearing sirens, wasn't tasting metal fear. "Where you at?" the boss asked, and it wasn't a question, it was a measurement. How useful are you right now, how loyal, how salvageable? He said an intersection name, stumbling over syllables, and the boss laughed like it was funny that he was still alive. "Listen," the voice went lower, "you do what you gotta do, vivo o you morto, you feel me? You get back to the block." Even translated in his head, it landed the same. No mercy, no rescue plan, just pressure wrapped in authority. He swallowed hard, cold sweat sliding down his spine, and for a second he wanted to scream, "I'm not built for this anymore." But he didn't say that, he said, "I got you," because the street code punishes honesty more than it punishes crime. He pushed the car harder, weaving through late-night traffic, an Uber with a glowing sign, a mom in a sedan, a guy eating fries at the wheel. Every time he passed someone, he saw a whole normal life in the corner of his vision, and it made him angry for reasons he couldn't explain. The cops were gaining, and the helicopter got louder, that steady chopping sound like a countdown you can hear. He took an exit into a neighborhood of tight streets and small houses, hoping the familiarity would save him, like the suburb itself would hide its own kid. But the blue lights followed, and suddenly the streets he grew up on looked different, less like home, more like a maze designed to trap him. He caught his reflection in the rear view for half a second, dark eyes wide, jaw clenched, a man trying to look tough while his soul was trembling. And that's when the thought hit, sharp and unwanted, this might be a dead end, and I'm the one who drove us here. He didn't have a master plan, not really, just momentum, ego, and the dirty hope that speed could rewrite consequences. That's the trap. You think the road is the story, but the story is always what's waiting at the stop sign you don't want to face. He told himself he'd fix it later, later he'd go straight, later he'd be a better man, later he'd hug his people and mean it. But later doesn't show up when you're breathless and surrounded by sirens, when the air tastes like panic and the night feels like it's closing in. He gripped the wheel until his knuckles went pale, whispering, "One last chance," like a prayer he didn't deserve. Ahead, the road narrowed, and he could see the glow of more patrol cars cutting across the intersection like a gate slamming shut. He exhaled through his teeth and aimed for the gap anyway, because once you live by the ride or die rule, the next chapter always begins at no way out. The second he hung up, the cabin felt smaller, like the Gulf had turned into a moving closet with guilt stuffed in the corners. His phone screen went dark, but the boss's words stayed lit in his head. "Vivo o you morto, get back to the block, don't embarrass the crew." That's the thing about a boss in the suburbs. He doesn't need to be in the passenger seat to control the wheel. He's in your rent, your debts, your mother's overdue bills, your little brother's sneakers, your pride, every silent contract you signed with hunger. So even with sirens screaming and blue lights strobing behind him, he caught himself trying to prove something. Not to the cops, not to the city. He was trying to prove it to the streets, to the myth that toughness makes you untouchable. And deep down, under the bravado, he felt that sticky cold sweat again, because he knew this mission wasn't just delivery, it was ownership. He'd grown up hearing the same sermon, just preached in a different church. Don't snitch. Don't fold. Don't look soft. The street code wasn't written anywhere, but everybody knew the chapters by heart, like it got passed down with the rent. You learn early that fear has to wear a mask, so you laugh louder, talk bigger, move faster, like noise can hide uncertainty. He remembered older dudes on the block telling stories like legends, bragging about outrunning cops like it was a sport, not survival. And he used to listen wide-eyed, thinking that one day he'd have those stories too, something that made people nod, respect you, step aside. Nobody told him the fine print. The stories always end with somebody dead, locked up, or addicted to the chase because peace feels boring. Now he was inside the story, and it didn't feel legendary. It felt like a dead end dressed up as destiny. He took a sharp turn past a closed laundromat, tires chirping, and for a second the car fishtailed like it wanted to quit on him. He corrected fast, jaw clenched, whispering, come on, like the steering wheel could hear prayers. In the mirror, a cop car kept pace, tight and patient, like it had done this dance 1,000 times and he was just the next name. He thought about slamming the brakes, ditching the trunk, running on foot, just vanish into backyards and shadows. But the boss's voice had planted a hook. You come back empty, you're not coming back at all. That's the part people don't get. Sometimes you're not running from the police, you're running from the consequences of disappointing your own side. And that's when the ride or die thing turns ugly, because dying stops sounding like the worst option. He started doing math without meaning to, gas gauge low, tires squealing, heart pounding. How many minutes until no way out became official? Every red light looked like a trap, every intersection like a choice that could split his life in half. He tried to remember the boss's face, to feel loyalty like heat in his chest, but all he felt was pressure. Like a hand on the back of his neck pushing him forward, even when his instincts begged him to slow down. He told himself, this is temporary. One run, one bag, then I'm out. That lie tastes sweet because it sounds like control. But if you've ever been stuck in a loop, bad job, toxic relationship, broke mindset, you know how one more time can turn into 10 years. His cold sweat wasn't just fear of prison, it was fear that he'd built a life where he couldn't choose anything anymore. A helicopter swept overhead, and the street below flashed like a stage, bright for a second, then dark again. He ducked instinctively, like the light could touch him, like it could label him, like it could expose the boy he used to be. On the sidewalk, two teenagers froze and stared, phones half raised, not sure if they were watching danger or entertainment. He hated that, hated being a clip, a moment, a headline, because part of him wanted to be invisible, safe, normal. But the streets don't reward normal. They reward bold, they reward crazy, they reward people who act like consequences are for somebody else. He punched the gas again and muttered, one last chance, because saying it out loud made it feel real, like a spell. The blue lights answered with louder sirens, like the city itself was saying, nah, you're not slipping away that easy. And then, right in the middle of all that noise, a memory hit him, quiet, random, brutal. His little girl's laugh, the way it sounded when she ran across the living room with socks on hardwood, sliding like a tiny skater. He hadn't been there the last time she did it. He'd been busy, which is what men say when they don't want to admit they chose wrong. He pictured her face the next morning if he didn't make it home, and something in his chest tightened hard. Not fear, something worse, regret showing up early, like it couldn't wait until the end to start hurting him. He tried to shake it off, because feelings are dangerous when you're moving at high speed, but it stuck like gum on a shoe. And that's when the mission stopped being about the trunk and started being about whether he could live with himself if this ended ugly. He cut down a narrow street lined with chain-link fences and small porches, the kind of block where everybody knows everybody's business. A woman on a porch stepped back inside fast, like she'd seen this movie before and didn't want to be in the scene. His mind raced, ditch the car, dump the evidence, keep the street code, or save his own life and accept the fallout. Either way felt like betrayal. Betray the cops and die, betray the boss and die, betray yourself and live with it. That's the real trap of the life. It puts you in choose-your-poison situations until you start thinking poison is normal. He swallowed, hands tight on the wheel, cold sweat sliding down his ribs, and for the first time he thought, I might actually be out of options. Up ahead, he saw more patrol cars sliding into position, an improvised wall of steel, and he realized the next few seconds would decide everything, which is exactly how a dead end announces itself before it becomes no way out. The first pop didn't sound real. It was quick, sharp, like something snapping under pressure, and for half a second he thought it was in his head. Then the steering wheel jerked hard to the right, and the car dipped unevenly like it had stepped into a hole. Another pop. Then a hiss. Damn, he breathed, gripping tight as the Golf started dragging instead of flying. They'd thrown spikes somewhere back there, and he hadn't even seen them. Professional, clean, no drama. That's when he felt it for real, the net tightening, not fast, not loud, just inevitable. He tried to compensate, easing off the gas, but momentum doesn't forgive easily at that speed. The back tire shredded against asphalt, sparks faint under the chassis, the smell of rubber burning sharp in the air. Behind him, the blue lights weren't chasing anymore, they were closing, confident now. The helicopter lowered slightly, spotlight cutting through the dark like a finger pointing straight at him. There's something humbling about being lit up from above. It strips away the myth, the bravado, the ride-or-die fantasy. He wasn't a legend in that moment. He was a man in a failing car, boxed in by math and consequence. The gas needle dipped lower, flirting with empty like it was playing games. He laughed once, short, humorless, because of course it was running out now. Everything was lining up against him. Tires blown, tank draining, streets narrowing. This wasn't a chase anymore, it was a slow-motion collapse. And the worst part? He saw it happening and still couldn't fully accept it. Denial is a powerful drug. You keep thinking maybe the universe will blink first. But the universe rarely blinks for people who ignore warning signs. He cut another turn, but the car didn't respond the same way. It felt heavy, wounded. Each rotation of the wheel felt like dragging history behind him. He could hear the metallic thud of the damaged rim hitting pavement, rhythm uneven, ugly. The cops weren't even rushing now. They were pacing, like predators who know the prey's already tired. And that's when his breathing changed again. Breathless, but slower now, more deliberate. The adrenaline wasn't spiking anymore. It was settling into something colder. The kind of awareness that creeps in right before reality fully lands. He looked around and recognized the block, low-income housing units, small lawns, old American flags fading on porches. Kids used to ride bikes here in the summer, laughing loud, racing for no reason. He'd been one of them once, before pride and pressure reshaped him. Back then, cops driving through meant caution, but not collapse. Now it meant spotlight, perimeter, arrest or worse. He wondered briefly how many of those kids watching from behind curtains saw him as cool instead of cautionary. That thought stung worse than the tire shredding itself. The engine coughed once. Then again. Fuel light blinking like a warning he'd ignored too long, not just tonight, but for years. He eased off the gas entirely now, knowing it was over but still pretending it wasn't. The street code doesn't prepare you for this part. It teaches you how to act strong, not how to surrender gracefully. And surrender, in his world, felt like erasing your name from existence. But so did dying in a spotlight for cargo that wasn't even his. The car finally lost momentum and rolled unevenly to a reluctant stop near an abandoned lot. Sirens surrounded him, not distant anymore, not echoing, but immediate, layered, closing. Doors slammed in sequence. Commands started flying, sharp, rehearsed, authoritative. Hands up. Engine off. Step out slowly. He stayed frozen for a second longer than he should have, staring at his cracked dashboard like it held answers. Because in that stillness, with blue lights reflecting in his windshield and nowhere left to run, he realized the chase wasn't ending, it was transforming, and the next decision would be far more dangerous than the speed ever was. The silence after the engine died was louder than the sirens. For a split second, everything slowed, the flashing blue lights, the helicopter beam circling, the echo of commands bouncing off brick walls. He could hear his own heartbeat, thick and uneven, like it was trying to punch its way out of his chest. "Hands up!" somebody shouted again, closer now, sharper. He looked at the empty gas gauge, the shredded tire, the cracked windshield reflecting red and blue like war paint. And instead of stepping out like logic suggested, he did what panic does best. He chose chaos. Because when your whole life runs on the street code, surrender feels worse than death. He flung the door open suddenly and moved before his brain could argue. A woman had just stepped out of a nearby townhouse, drawn by the noise like everyone else. Mid-30s, grocery bag in hand, phone halfway raised, eyes wide with that frozen confusion of someone caught in someone else's disaster. He grabbed her, arm around her shoulders, pulling her back against his chest. The bag fell, oranges rolling across the pavement like tiny, careless witnesses. "Don't move," he barked, voice louder than he meant, trying to sound in control. Inside, though, he felt it, that crack in his certainty widening fast. The officers reacted instantly, guns up, distance measured, voices shifting from command to containment. The sirens cut off one by one, replaced by negotiation tones and radio chatter. Spotlights adjusted, angles calculated, rooftop silhouettes appearing like shadows with rifles. He backed toward the car, dragging her with him, trying to reposition like he'd seen in movies. But movies don't show you the trembling hands, the dry mouth, the cold sweat sliding down your spine. They don't show how heavy another human body feels when you know you're responsible for their fear. And right there, with her breathing fast against his arm, he understood something ugly. This wasn't strength, it was desperation. "Calm down," someone called from behind a patrol door, voice steady, rehearsed. "We can talk this through." He almost laughed at that. Talk? when his name was probably already being typed into a report. He tightened his grip, not to hurt her, but because letting go felt like falling into a dead end with no rope. The helicopter light locked onto them now, harsh and exposing, like judgment from the sky. Neighbors were filming from behind curtains, phones glowing faint in dark windows. In that glow, he wasn't a soldier of the block anymore. He was a headline forming in real time. His mind raced for leverage, demands, exits, some way to flip the script. "I want safe passage," he shouted, though he had no idea where safe even was anymore. The negotiator stepped forward slowly, hands visible, voice calm like a therapist in a crisis room. "You don't want this to end worse than it has to," the man said. "But worse is relative when you're already staring at no way out." He kept repeating inside his head, "I don't fail the mission, I don't fold, I don't break." Yet the mission was abandoned in the trunkless car behind him, and all that was left was ego and fear. The woman whimpered softly, and that sound cut deeper than the sirens ever did. It wasn't dramatic, it was human, raw, trembling. He remembered his daughter crying once when thunder shook the house, the way she'd run straight into his arms. That memory hit harder than any spike strip. For a moment, his grip loosened, not visibly, but internally. He wasn't thinking about the boss anymore, or the cargo, or the block. He was thinking about what kind of man terrifies someone who just wanted to bring groceries home. Still, pride is stubborn. He raised his voice again, making demands he didn't fully believe, trying to rebuild the wall inside his chest. Negotiators crouched behind open doors, snipers adjusted positions above rooftops, radios crackled in rhythm. The blue lights painted the street like a distorted carnival, bright, chaotic, impossible to ignore. Every second stretched long, like time itself was watching him choose who he was going to be. And deep down, beneath the adrenaline and the cold sweat, he felt it creeping in. The realization that the real fight wasn't with the police anymore. It was between the man he pretended to be and the father he still could become. Time stretched thin, like a wire pulled too tight between two rooftops. He stood there under the helicopter's glare, arm locked around the woman, feeling every eye on him. The negotiator's voice floated steady across the asphalt, calm like he'd done this 100 times before. "Let's slow this down," the man said, hands open, tone low. Slow down. That sounded almost funny in a night that started at 100 miles an hour. But the truth is, chaos eventually reaches a point where it turns quiet, dangerous quiet. And in that quiet, you start hearing yourself think. His chest was still breathless, but not from running anymore, from realizing there was nowhere left to run. The street code had prepared him to fight, to flee, to endure pain without flinching. It hadn't prepared him to stand still while strangers analyzed his every move. Snipers on rooftops adjusted their scopes. Patrol cars formed a half-circle like steel teeth. The woman in his grip trembled slightly, her pulse visible in her neck. He wasn't squeezing hard, but he wasn't letting go either. Because letting go felt like stepping straight into a dead end without armor. The negotiator took another slow step forward. "What's your name?" he asked, like identity still mattered in that moment. He almost answered. Almost. But names make things personal, and personal makes things fragile. Instead, he barked, "Back up!" trying to sound like the version of himself he used to admire. The officers didn't flinch. They'd heard louder, seen worse. That realization stung more than the sirens ever could. He wasn't extraordinary here, just another file. Inside his head, the boss's words kept looping, "Vivo o you morto." Loyalty had once felt like strength, now it felt like a chain. He replayed every step that led here, the first easy money, the first time someone called him reliable, solid, fearless. Funny how validation can be the most addictive substance in the suburbs. When you grow up being underestimated, any form of respect feels like oxygen. But oxygen can turn into smoke if it's burning the wrong house. And tonight, everything smelled like something was about to collapse. The negotiator tried a different angle. "You've got people who care about you," he said, voice carrying just enough empathy to cut through noise. That phrase hit harder than threats ever could. Care about you. It sounded foreign in a scene built on force and perimeter control. He shifted slightly, the woman flinching as he repositioned his stance. For the first time all night, his hands weren't steady, they were heavy. The helicopter beam drifted briefly, then re-centered. Cameras were definitely rolling now. News vans probably lining up outside the perimeter. He imagined his face splashed across screens, commentators dissecting his past like it was entertainment. Another statistic. Another armed suspect. Another broken story. And suddenly the weight of image felt unbearable. The blue lights didn't just signal arrest, they signaled exposure. And exposure strips the myth away from the man. The negotiator stopped advancing and crouched slightly, lowering his profile. "We can call someone," he offered quietly. The words floated strange in the night air. Call someone. It wasn't tactical, it was personal. And that tiny shift cracked something deeper than fear. Because when you've been living by ride or die, the idea of calling home feels almost rebellious. He swallowed hard, cold sweat cooling on his skin, not knowing that the next voice he would hear was about to dismantle every wall he'd built around himself. The negotiator didn't rush it. He stepped back slightly, raised a hand toward one of the officers, and nodded once. A phone was brought forward slowly, like it carried something fragile instead of circuitry. "You need to hear this," the negotiator said, voice lower now, almost personal. He hesitated. His pride told him to refuse. His ego told him this was manipulation. But curiosity, dangerous, human curiosity, made him shift his grip just enough to free one hand. And when the phone was placed near his ear, everything inside him went still. "Baby." Her voice. Not panicked, not screaming, just trembling under control, the way someone sounds when they're trying to be strong for you. The street vanished. The blue lights, the rifles, the helicopter, all of it blurred. For a second, he wasn't a suspect. He wasn't a headline. He was a husband who hadn't come home. And that realization hit harder than any spike strip ever could. "I saw it on the news," she whispered. His throat tightened instantly. News. So it was already everywhere. "Our daughter's here with me." That sentence cracked something open inside him. He closed his eyes for half a second, and a tear escaped before he could stop it. He'd been trained not to cry, not to break, not to show weakness. But this wasn't weakness, it was recognition. Then he heard it, small, shaky, unmistakable. "Daddy." His daughter's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through layers of ego like light through glass. He swallowed hard, suddenly breathless, not from fear, but from love colliding with consequence. "Hey, princess," he tried to say steady, but his voice betrayed him. She asked the simplest question in the world, "Are you coming home?" And that question carried more weight than every gun pointed at him. He looked down at the woman in his grip, realizing for the first time how wrong the image was. Somebody else's daughter. Somebody else's family waiting. The street code never prepared him for this kind of mirror. The boss never mentioned this chapter, the one where loyalty clashes with fatherhood. The negotiator stayed silent, letting the moment work. And for the first time all night, he wasn't thinking about survival. He was thinking about legacy. His wife spoke again, softer now. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," she said. Those words echoed louder than the sirens ever had. Because proving himself had been the engine behind every bad choice. Proving he wasn't weak. Proving he wasn't poor. Proving he mattered. But here was someone telling him he already did. And suddenly the whole mission felt small, cheap even. His grip loosened almost unconsciously. The woman stepped forward slightly, sensing the shift. He didn't even notice the rifles adjusting, the officers leaning in, tension recalculating. All he could see in his mind was his daughter's face at the kitchen table, crayons scattered, asking if he'd make it to her school recital. He had missed that one. Said he was busy. How many more busy excuses did he have left? "I'm sorry," he whispered into the phone, not just to his wife, but to something bigger. The words felt foreign, heavy, overdue. "I'm so sorry." The negotiator gently extended his hand. "Let her go," he said calmly. And in that suspended moment between ego and redemption, he made the first truly free decision of the night. He didn't make a dramatic move. There was no cinematic speech, no final shout into the night. He simply opened his arm and let the woman step forward. She moved slowly at first, then quicker, hands raised, tears streaking her face under the blue lights. Officers pulled her behind cover, Voices overlapping, commands tightening. He stayed where he was, phone still pressed to his ear, breathing uneven, breathless in a way that had nothing to do with running. For the first time all night, he wasn't fighting. He was choosing. "I'm here," he said softly into the phone, more to himself than anyone else. His wife was crying now, not loud, just broken in small pieces. His daughter's voice had faded into the background, replaced by muffled whispers. He lowered the phone slowly, like it weighed 100 pounds. The negotiator stepped closer, careful, measured. "You're doing the right thing," he said. "Right." That word felt strange, like trying on clothes that never belonged to him. He lifted his free hand halfway, unsure whether to fully surrender or brace himself. In these seconds, time did that weird stretching thing again. He could hear his own pulse in his ears, louder than the distant radio chatter. The helicopter light drifted slightly, recalibrating. Somewhere behind the perimeter, a news reporter probably whispered into a microphone. History was seconds away from choosing its version of him. And he didn't know if it would be redemption or obituary. He started to lower himself, knees bending slightly, hands opening wider. "I'm done," he muttered. Not to the police, not to the negotiator. To the life. To the street code that had promised respect but delivered fear. To the boss who said vivo ou morto like either outcome was acceptable. He felt something close to peace for half a heartbeat. Like maybe this was the one last chance he'd whispered about all night. Then it happened. A sharp crack split the air. Not from him. Not intentional. One misread movement, one finger too tense, one rookie officer flinching under pressure. The sound was louder than the earlier spike pops, louder than the sirens. And suddenly his body reacted before his mind could catch up. Heat exploded through his side. His legs gave out like the strings had been cut. He hit the pavement hard, vision tilting, the sky above spinning with helicopter blades. Voices shouted, "Shots fired!" Boots pounding asphalt. But it all sounded distant now, underwater. He tried to breathe and couldn't pull enough air in, breathless, but this time not from adrenaline. From damage. He lay there staring at the dark sky, blue lights flashing in distorted halos. He thought of his daughter's question again, "Are you coming home?" And that's when the regret hit, not loud, not dramatic, just heavy. Heavy like missed birthdays. Heavy like busy nights. Heavy like every shortcut he took thinking he'd fix it later. There was no later now. He felt warmth spreading under him, soaking into fabric, into pavement. He tried to move his hand and barely managed an inch. His thoughts slowed, but one truth sharpened painfully clear. The mission had never been about loyalty or pride. It had been about fear dressed up as strength. And as the night closed in tighter than any perimeter ever could, he realized the real fight wasn't survival anymore. It was whether he'd face the end with honesty. The pavement felt colder than he expected. Not freezing, just real. Real in a way nothing else had been all night. The helicopter still hovered, but its sound was fading into something distant, like a memory already starting to detach. Boots surrounded him, voices layered, radios crackling urgent codes. But inside his head, it was strangely quiet. And in that quiet, truth finally had room to speak. He tried to lift his head and couldn't. The sky above him was dark, broken only by spinning blades and scattered stars. He remembered lying on grass as a kid, counting those same stars, believing the world was bigger than the block. Back then, he didn't dream of missions or bosses or proving anything. He dreamed of cars, sure, but also of peace, of laughter, of something stable. Somewhere along the way, survival had replaced purpose. And survival without direction turns into a dead end faster than you think. He felt hands pressing against his side, paramedics working fast. "Stay with us," someone said. Funny thing about that phrase, it assumes you were fully present to begin with. He hadn't really been present for years. Always chasing money, status, validation, stuck in that ride or die mindset. Always telling himself this was temporary, that redemption could wait. But redemption doesn't wait politely, it waits quietly until you're ready to see it. His mind drifted to his daughter again. Her laugh. Her tiny shoes by the door. The way she'd grab his finger with her whole hand when crossing the street. He imagined her growing up asking questions he wouldn't be there to answer. That thought pierced deeper than the bullet. Because the real wound wasn't physical, it was legacy. What story would they tell about him? He wanted to say something, anything that mattered. Not to the cops. Not to the cameras. To God. "Forgive me," he whispered, barely audible even to himself. There was no excuse left, no blaming poverty, no blaming pressure. Pain explains behavior, but it doesn't justify harm. And that realization came too late to undo damage, but not too late to understand it. The blue lights reflected in his eyes one last time. They didn't look threatening anymore. They just looked like consequence. And consequence, when accepted, stops being an enemy. It becomes a teacher. He finally understood what strength actually was. Not dominance. Not intimidation. Not fearlessness. Strength was choosing differently when it still counted. Strength was walking away before the spike strips. Strength was answering the phone sooner. Strength was going home instead of proving something to people who'd disappear at the first sign of weakness. He saw that clearly now, painfully clear. The street code had promised respect. But love had always been the only thing that truly made him matter. His breathing slowed. Not chaotic anymore. Just shallow. He didn't feel rage. He didn't feel panic. He felt understanding. Understanding that every man gets offered a one last chance. Sometimes it comes early and we ignore it. Sometimes it comes at the very end, when all we can do is recognize it. And as the night held him in that final stillness, he let go, not of life in anger, but of pride in surrender. And in that surrender, he finally found the truth he'd been outrunning since the first time he chose the streets over himself. And now I want to ask you something real. At what moment do you think he truly lost control? Was it when he pressed the gas and ignored the sirens? Was it when he chose the mission over his family? Or was it long before that? The first time he believed the street code was stronger than love? Be honest with yourself. Have you ever chased something, money, respect, validation, thinking it would fix everything? Have you ever told yourself, just one more time, before making a decision you knew wasn't right? That's how most dead ends begin. Quietly. Not with flashing blue lights, but with small compromises. Now I want to hear from you. Backhand index pointing right, do you think he deserved a second chance? Backhand index pointing right, if the shot hadn't happened, do you believe he would have changed? Backhand index pointing right, what would you have done in that moment? And most important, musical note, which song should we transform into a powerful story next? Drop the title in the comments. Let's build something deeper than just entertainment. Let's build reflection. If this story made you feel something, don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications. Because here, we don't just retell music. We bring it to life.